briefly turn on my video for you to confirm that that is me. So that is it. I'll switch off the video. Thank you. So morning once again. Thank you for joining us today for the Decoding Privacy Notices, what you are really agreeing to webinar. As we celebrate Data Privacy Day, we at the Personal Data Protection Office, PDPO, are committed to raising awareness about the importance of privacy and the protection of personal data. Today's webinar plays a crucial role in our month-long celebration. Privacy notices are a cornerstone in various sectors, from services to healthcare. However, the complexity can often lead to misunderstandings. Our aim today is to demystify these documents, shedding light on their legal and practical implications. We want to empower you, the data subject, the individual whose data is collected, and also our participants, to better understand these notices. Now, in Uganda, we use the language of notices to be able to help you understand that a policy is an internal document and the notice is the one which is public-facing. To also ensure that you are informed, particularly in how your consent is obtained in various interactions. So a privacy notice is any document, like I've indicated, that is outward facing, letting you know through clear communication from these organizations what information they want to collect from you, why, whom they may share it with, how long they'll keep it, and how do they even secure it. We have a packed session ahead of us, including insights from esteemed panelists from different walks of life, those that are advising ride-hailing company, advocacy and policy, but also information security. And we'll also have a Q&A session. So once again, thank you for joining us. I'll hand over to our moderator, but before I do that, I'll introduce her. She's Ms. Barbara Among Arinda, a lawyer of more than 12 years experience, specializing in corporate, commercial, and data protection law, and also credit reference bureau. She currently is the founder and CEO of WinCurve Consult Limited, which offers training, management, and consultancy services in various professional areas, specifically data protection, among others. She's a lawyer by training and advocate, and also a certified data protection expert, certified by the International Association of Privacy Professionals. With that, I hand over to Barbara to take us through the webinar from here. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Baker. It's indeed a pleasure to be part of this webinar this morning. Good morning, everyone. You're welcome. Our panelists, thank you so much for making the time. We understand you're very busy people, but we appreciate that you've made the time to join. And also for everyone who is joining in to learn something or pick something for whatever intention, we really appreciate you. Thank you for making the time. So as introduced by Becca, my name is Barbara Among Arinda. And this morning, he's given us the objective of today's training. This is a very interesting topic that we are having. It's something that cuts across different lives. It can be your personal life, career life, different walks of life. So whether you're here on an individual basis, or whether you're coming from a company, or you're representing a different policy or legal making agency, you're totally welcome. Today's program will start with the introduction of the different panelists, who are very profound people that are coming from different organizations that deal with everyday data issues or data matters, and it's pertinent that they get to incorporate different privacy practices within their businesses. And then we'll get to the panel discussion. We'll have about 40 minutes for that, after which we'll go into the Q&A. I'll therefore urge you that if you have any questions, kindly put them in the Q&A panel. Don't put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A panel. It will be easy to attend to them from there. And afterwards, we shall have the closing remarks from PDP or Uganda. So we'll start with introducing our panelists. Today we have Mr. Brian Kalule. He's a partner at AF Panga Advocates, and he's also in-country counsel for Wuba Technologies. I'm sure you're all familiar with Wuba. He does head the technology department within his department, and he also represents different entities locally and internationally when it comes to data privacy matters. He has over 12 years experience within the legal practice, commercial aspects, and he also has deep knowledge of privacy and data protection laws and regulations. He currently has a profession that is from International Association of Privacy Professionals, and he's also a member of the technology law commitment of the International Bar Association. Brian, you're welcome. Then our next panelist is Miss Frida Nalmasi Mugambe, who is very, very popular and is very good when it comes to advocacy work. She embodies a profound role as the research lead at Unwanted Witness, exemplifying expertise as a rule of law and human rights delivery specialist. She goes beyond as she serves as a linchpin in advocacy strategies, resource mobilization, and championing change. Her domain expertise extends to safeguarding mechanisms and sustainable solutions of marginalized groups, offering invaluable insights into the landscape of national human rights, and also she facilitates the conception of diverse and multinational human rights initiatives. You're welcome, Frida. And then our next panelist is someone from a very popular institution as well. Becca talked about, we have the three panelists are coming from different areas of practice. So this one is someone from information security. This is Emmanuel Cliff Mungahwa. He is the information security manager for Vision Group and has over 13 years experience in IT, digital services.
Okay, I think we've lost Barbara. Let's give her just a minute to come back online.
Fight ethical hacker, and well, thank you for joining.
Please bear with us as we work on the connectivity challenges Barbara is facing. Our moderator, we should be able to progress with the webinar in a few. She's back. Thank you. Over to you, Barbara.
Sorry, I dropped. No,
For those raising your hands, please put your query or inquiry into the Q&A panel. Barbara, can you hear us?
Yes, maybe I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, maybe if you can turn off the video to manage the bandwidth capacity, because we've been losing you. Thank you.
Okay. Where did I break off from? Before I dropped off.
We are still introducing the panelists.
Okay, so I'll just get back to that. I'll quickly introduce Brian Kalule. So Brian is a partner at AF Panga Advocates and is also the in-country counsel for Uber Technologies. He heads the firm's technology practice, which includes the privacy and data protection group. Brian holds an LLB from Makerere University and is also a certified information privacy professional. He's a member of the International Association of the Privacy Professionals and is also a member of the Technology Law Committee of the International Bar Association. Brian, you're welcome. And then our next panelist is Ms. Freda Nalumansi Mugambe. Freda embodies a profound role as the research lead at Unwanted Witness, exemplifying expertise as a rule of law and human rights delivery.
Becca, may I suggest that I think we're already losing time. Maybe you can take over the moderation as Barbara reconnects, if you don't mind.
Okay. So we're being introduced. Brian, you've been introduced.
I think everybody was introduced.
Emmanuel as well. Okay, Emmanuel works with New Vision in the information security domain, and it comes from that angle. So I believe now we can go to the first question to our panelists. Anita, I'm requesting you can let me know when Barbara is back online. So
Sure.
Ms. Freda Nalumansi Mugambe works as a research lead with Unwanted Witness. She has been part of the development of work around reviewing of public notices of different organizations. So the first question, this is a question that will be put to each of the panelists. I'll start with Brian. Can you provide, just a minute. Anita, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, sure.
I think Barbara is back. She's connecting her audio.
Oh, okay, I can go with the question, then pick up from the rest. Can you provide a specific example of how user personal data, as described in Uber's privacy notice, is utilized in the company's operations and services? Over to you, Brian.
Okay. Thank you, Becca, and good morning, everybody. Yeah, so I'm here in the capacity as Uber's representative. Specifically, I'm their legal counsel, and I'm sure everybody has heard of Uber or they have used Uber. And if you haven't used it, I'm sure after this call, after all your concerns have been ameliorated, I will have more Uber users going forward. So in a nutshell, what Uber does is to put transportation and food delivery at your fingertips. Obviously, this is done through your devices. It could be a computer, it could be a phone. And to make this possible, Uber collects personal data and uses it in different ways, which I'm going to explain. So I'll just give you a summary of the personal data we collect and then what we use it for. So the first category of personal data Uber collects is called account information. It is inclusive of so many different data categories, but essentially account information is the data Uber collects for you to be able to set up an Uber account. So this data includes names, your password, your email, your phone number, your profile picture, your payment and banking information. Some people pay using cards, so that information Uber collects. The second category of information is background information. This one is usually for the drivers and the people who deliveries. So Uber collects driver history or their criminal records. It collects their license status, whether they have the relevant licenses. It also collects their known aliases. You know, people use different names in different situations. So it collects that information and also collects their prior addresses. The next data category Uber collects is identification. Again, this is usually for the drivers, their IDs of any form. There is demographic data we collect, which includes date of birth, your gender, your occupation, your education level. Uber also collects user content, and this includes the chat logs and call records. If you send messages in the Uber app or if you make calls, all of those records, which we call user content, are personal data, and they are collected. Uber collects location data, GPS, and you know, to be able to locate where you are. So it also collects device data, including hardware models, the device IP addresses, the operating system, the software. And then there is transaction data. When you're transacting on the Uber app, all that information, the metadata that is generated is collected. So in a nutshell, that's the nature of the personal data Uber collects. And what we use it for, really different data is used for different things. And the first obvious reason the data is collected is to be able to provide the Uber services. So the account information, as I mentioned, is used to create an account. Then it is also used to enable services and features. It is used to enable user matching. For instance, if you're searching for a driver, we need to know which driver is in the location, is nearest to the location where you are. So we will collect your location data to be able to make that possible. Sometimes people have different preferences. For instance, some people may say that I want to be driven by lady drivers. So we would collect those demographics of gender to be able to match different users. We also use the data to be able to calculate the fees and fares. For instance, the location determines the distance, and then in turn determines how much fee will be paid. Then, of course, the financial information is used to process payments. If you're paying by card, then we'll need your card details to be able to make that possible. The other use is safety, fraud protection, and security. So for this, we use identity card, your identification to be able to verify users to make sure that we don't carry the wrong elements. We also use the data to prevent and detect fraud. So again, things like location data, device data, communication data, account information, and IDs can be used when we are detecting or investigating fraud. The other use is customer support. For instance, if people make complaints and Uber needs to address those, they will look through some of your data, for instance, the transaction details to verify what really happened, usage data, location data to know who moved from where to what place, the device data to track people's trajectories. So then we also use this information to monitor and improve the service. So user content is one such data that you use for monitoring and improvement of the service. The other use is research and development, to make analyses, to do machine learning, to do product development, to do research, and to do testing. So essentially, all the data that we collect assists in some of these purposes. The other use is to enable communication between users. For instance, if you need to add somebody to a trip, then you probably go in the app and then get their details and add them to a trip. So we use people's personal data to be able to enable communication between users. There is marketing and advertising. So we'll get your contacts and send you promotional materials to promote Uber services or to promote Uber partners services. For instance, we can tell you if you're, for instance, in a different city, you can receive a message that says restaurants near you. And most likely those restaurants will be Uber's partners. So there are also non-marketing communications like surveys and important messages, for instance, health warnings and security warnings. So that's the other use. So we'll need your contacts to be able to pass on this information. And last but not least, legal proceedings and requirements. So your data will be used if it is necessary to investigate claims or address disputes. And sometimes Uber is required by law to collect some of your data. And the most obvious is for anti-money laundering purposes, they need to know the identity of the person they are dealing with. Essentially, they should collect your KYC. So that is a legal requirement. So Becca, in summary, that's the data Uber collects and the purposes for which it is used. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian. We'll move on to Frida to share her own perspective, but also keep the responses very short. Over to you, Frida, and then Emmanuel. Frida, are you there? I think you're on mute. Okay, I'll ask Emmanuel to go for now.
Hi, good morning. Emmanuel from New Vision, as introduced. Brian said, generally for us, the data we collect is really about interests, demographics, and behavior. We do not go so much into a lot of the PII because we need basic data to be able to do our work. So that includes things like your names, your email address, phone numbers, your physical address, and maybe your gender. And it's really for fulfillment of business purposes. So this information, we mostly use it, 1, to create and manage your account with us. 2, to keep in touch with you via email because we need to keep the relationship. So we use your email, SMS, social media contacts, and phone calls, basically to keep in touch for customer care and other purposes. We as well use it to craft and customize content to send to you because, as you know, we're a media house. So when you come and select, say you're interested in farming tips, a business and things like that, that information you provide us with is what we use to basically craft your preferences and send you either newsletters or what you see sometimes. We as well use that information to enable payments for our services, but we are not a payment processing company, you know. So what we do usually, and it will come later on in the explanation, is some of this information is processed through us, but by a payment service provider who takes a payment. So most times we do not take your details, but we trust our PSP enough that they are secure and we make sure they are compliant with standards to take that information and use it appropriately. We as well use that data collected for analysis and planning for future product development. That is, I think, self-explanatory. Things like gender and age demographics are used for us for planning what we are going to, provide to our viewers and readers for our products in, the next cycle for our business. We as well collect data about your mobile devices because we need to be able to customize our technology to feed into the devices that you have. Some people have really old devices, and so we need to be able to build a technology that will run on, several devices. So that's why we collect it, for nothing else, no tracking, but just basically so that we can craft technology fit for use by everyone. And then lastly, for targeted advertising, even this is not directly through us. We use a third party like Google, who uses cookies. But they collect your data on our behalf, and then we can do targeted advertising. So that's pretty much what New Vision uses data for.
Well, thank you so much, Emmanuel. I'm sure the members are able to appreciate or relate, as when we usually say New Vision, probably what will come to most people's minds is typically just the newspapers, but we know you've moved away so much from there to digitalize digitalize what you provide. All right, thank you so much. Frida, are you ready? Okay, I think we'll just move to the next set of questions as we keep checking in with Frida. So Brian, over to you. What are some common misconceptions users may have about Uber's data practices, and how does your privacy notice clarify this?
Oh, thank you, Barbara. Well, misconceptions. Well, I did a quick market research and I didn't find very many. but there were some concerns, and I'll address them. Obviously, the first one was about transparency. People were saying they're not very sure what their data is used for, and of course, I had to reassure them that Uber is very open and clear about it, and clear about the information it collects from its users, and it is where the users are contained in the private notice. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at Uber's privacy notice. It's available publicly, you can even get it on the internet. It's in a very easy to read and accessible manner. It doesn't have any legalese, no jargon. It is short. It's very intuitive. I mean, if you went with icons and layers and on time, and it avoids very long text, and it uses icons and symbols to be able to be very functional. So on the transparency concern, as I pointed out, that if you went into that privacy notice and read it carefully, you would know from start to finish the data cycle Uber collects, and there shouldn't be any transparency concerns. The other one was obviously selling data. Not a concern per se, but people were wondering if Uber sells their data. And of course, selling data is a criminal offense, I think, under the data protection law of Uganda, and it can only be done with the consent of the data subject. And the privacy notice of Uber is very clear on this, that selling data is not one of the uses for the data. So that concern is also not very well founded. The other concern, obviously, was about data security. This one is a bit historical. I remember, I think in 2014, there was a massive data leak of Uber users' data. So, I mean, we've come a long way since 2014. It's almost 10 years down the road. Uber has improved its safety procedures. And as the privacy notice makes clear, Uber uses reasonable and appropriate safeguards to prevent loss and authorized and unauthorized use of personal data. So one of the things it does is what we call privacy by design. So Uber builds privacy into its products from start to finish, and it performs privacy reviews on new and on new products and technologies to make sure that they fulfill users' expectations. So data security, I mean, it is a prevalent risk. I mean, the bad guys are always innovating and trying to see how they can compromise systems. But we are alive to this, and we have adopted the world-class standards and security measures to prevent data loss. The other one is data rights, and people were saying where they don't know their data rights. But again, the privacy notice elaborates on this. But what I think on this is that actually it is a rarely used right. I would encourage people to take it up and exercise their data rights. For instance, if you want to know how much money you paid through Uber over the years, you can get that information. You can know the trips you've taken. You can know. Well, I was in a different city, I think in November, and they told me that Uber sent me a message saying that you've been to 3 different cities in the past 2 months. So some of that may look may seem to be innocuous information, but you can exercise your data rights and get it. The last concern was about sharing personal data with their drivers. And I would admit to an extent, the drivers get to know their users' personal data, but they get to know only the essential details, like the name and the contact. But the contact is actually provided in the app. So if a driver accepts a trip, and they will know the person they are going to provide transportation, and then in the app there is their phone contact for them to be able to reach them in case they can't find them. So that is the only personal data the drivers access of the users. Other than that, they also don't have the other details. They don't know your bank accounts. They don't know your date of birth. And the privacy notice makes this very clear. So I think, Barbara, with those, there shouldn't be any concerns about users' personal data with Uber. Thank you very much.
Okay, Brian, thanks for sharing that. We all know that Uber is an everyday service that is used by the ordinary person, and whoever is on this call for your companies and your individual lives, I guess you've been able to pick a thing or two. Now over to you, Frida, if you can be able to respond to the first response in about a minute, the first question in a minute, and then we'll move to Emma to respond to his second question. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Do you hear me? Do you
Yes,
hear me?
very well. Yes,
Okay.
very well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Barbara, our dear moderators, colleagues from PDPO, fellow panelists, and all participants present. Greetings from Unwanted Witness, Uganda. Special thanks to the PDPO office for organizing this very important webinar. And we appreciate the opportunity to share a few reflections as we equally join the world in commemorating the International Data Privacy Day, celebrated annually on 28th January. In terms of my submissions for the first question, in relation to the use of the data that is collected at Unwanted Witness, basically, we utilize the information for planning purposes, especially in respect of our programming areas and general engagement. We also use the data for reaching and engagement with partners and stakeholders, dissemination of information, especially around research works that we undertake, report findings and the like, as well as reaching out to partners for updates from our work annually, and where partners are non-responsive, corresponding data is removed from our databases. I thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Frida. So to you, Emmanuel. Just a second. Can you kindly give us specific elements that should be included in any privacy notices to clearly communicate the strength of an organization's information security measures and foster user trust?
Thank you, Barbara. You mentioned something about New Vision that I'll clarify. We are actually Vision Group. We trade as Vision Group. So for purposes of clarity, Vision Group has a lot of things going on beyond just the newspaper. So thank you very much for bringing that up.
Right.
In terms of the privacy notices, we notice so many people are vague in terms of the specifics of what to include, but these are some of the things I would really be or kindly include in it. One, you need to be specific about the elements of PII details that you collect, names, emails, and everything else. And also provide a reason to your clients why you collect that data, so that they are sure when they're giving that information. Number two, you need to let the people know their rights therein. For example, the right to have their data deleted. Many people think when you collect their data, then they do not have the right to have their data deleted and other things. Basically, let them know why you're collecting their data and that they have a right for your data to be deleted or changed according to your wishes. But that obviously has to be within considerations of the law. For example, on our side, UCC requires us to keep data about people and what we have for about a year. So then you need to be able to explain the confines under the law. Number three, you need to provide a definition for the technical terms. We've seen so many privacy notices hiding a lot of things under technicalities. So be clear to your people, explain to them, for example, what is a cookie? What does it do? What information is collected? And how is it kept? Number four, you need to include contact details in case people have grievances and queries. Some people develop privacy notices but do not put that. And in case people are aggrieved, there is no way to contact the people who are running a service for them. And obviously, you need to put review mechanisms where you explain to someone how they can check what sort of data they have with you. And if they're comfortable with it, then okay. If they're not, then they can ask you to change a few fields. So you need to put that in place as well. In case you share people's data with third parties, you need to be, very open to let them know that, we have this payment processor, or we have this other person plugging into our system and using your data. So you need to be very honest and open to people. Otherwise, you'll, let yourself open for a lot of lawsuits if you don't do that. And as well, you need to let people know what security controls are in place in terms of protection of their data. For example, if you're keeping it in the cloud, you need to explicitly state, but as well, let them know that their data is safe. It gives someone comfort to use your systems. And related to that, you as well need to make your policy accessible. People develop these things and keep them far away. And I don't know what they keep hiding. And also make sure that your notice is concise and precise, plain English or in plain language that people understand. Make it short. You and I have all looked at privacy notices that are pages long. And at the end of the day, all you have to do is scroll down to, I agree, but in truth, the thing was too long. You just agree because you need to use the service. So if you're honest and genuine enough, make it a couple of pages, 1 page or 2 pages long in simple English so that someone understands. So that for me is the consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel, very helpful. I will move to Frida. So Frida, based on your annual reviews that you do at Unwanted Witness, what common issues do you find in the company's privacy notices, and how could this be improved?
Thank you, Barbara. You hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay. I'm experiencing issues with the sound, so I hear you, but sometimes I don't, it seems I'm off. Anyway, so in terms of our annual reviews, we have had, so our annual reviews take the form of a scorecard. And so far, we've had, the scorecard basically is a compliance monitoring tool that we initiated in 2021. We use the scorecard to shine a spotlight on the policies of private and public sectors, either on how they advance or hinder privacy rights of users. In this scorecard, privacy policies of data collectors are assessed based on their respective local data protection laws and internationally acceptable data protection standards. And thereafter, the respective companies or government entities are recognized that buttress or ensure data protection and privacy best practices. So far, we have 3 reviews that have been undertaken. In 2021, the review featured 1 country, and which was Uganda, with a total of 32 companies assessed in 7 sectors against 5 indicators. In 2022, the review featured 2 countries, Kenya and Uganda, with a total of 12 companies assessed in 3 sectors compared to 2021 and against 5 indicators. While last year, the review increased the focus, featuring 4 countries, Mauritius, Zimbabwe, Kenya and Uganda, with a total of 48 companies assessed in 6 sectors against 6 indicators. Some of the common issues that we've found with companies' privacy notices or policies during the reviews include an overall compliance in all 3 reviews so far, which has generally been below 50%. With 35% in 2021, 45.5% in 2022, and the recent review, it was 47.3%. We've also observed demonstrable efforts towards compliance, particularly with requirements entailing existence of accessible and noticeable policies, and in the area of informed consent, where we observed significant scores among the different companies that were assessed. However, there have been variations in data privacy practices, and some of these include the following. A relatively low compliance with requirements in relation to data collection and third-party data transfers, variations in area of practicing robust data security, accountability, and as well as efforts around internal redress mechanisms for data breaches. We've also observed lack of transparency and accountability around personal data handling, ambiguous or non-existent privacy policies characterized by vague explanations of sharing where necessary, or they sometimes indicate using for service delivery, which create an environment of uncertainty for customers regarding how their information is collected, used, retained, or shared. The absence of published data retention policies or destruction procedures. We've also observed lack of visibility into security practices that prevent visibility of assessing risks and leave consumers unaware of their possible vulnerabilities. We've also observed deficiencies of user access, correction, and deletion rights, which has inhibited people from checking accuracy of deleting their data per the law. Then some policies or notices were either silent or unclear on transparency into third-party sharing, making it difficult for users to track where their data flows and evaluate secondary users. We also observe minimal accountability through public reporting of government requests, obviously obscuring surveillance and hiding overreach. The above can be improved if data collectors and processors play a crucial responsibility in proactively elevating transparency and implementing accountable data practices that are aligned with data protection legislation. For example, the annual release of a transparency report to demonstrate commitment to accountability beyond passive policies alone. For a release of such a report, it would highly be effective as it would comprehensively detail the collection of personal data through specifying who had access to it, whether government entities, private organizations, or individuals. Also, the data collectors and processors can publish privacy policies with exhaustive inventories of data types rather than vague summaries as key custodians of personal data collection, storage, and usage. Also, outlining specific retention periods could be undertaken, tailored to different categories of user information rather than indefinite storage. Describing security protections in place, whether at organizational, physical, or technical. Establishing functional mechanisms for users to submit access, correction, or deletion requests and obtain remedies. Comprehensively disclose any third-party entities or affiliates with whom personal data is shared, obviously justifying the necessity rather than blanket statements of obeying legal mandates. Also, if periodic data protection impact assessments can be undertaken to continuously evaluate privacy risks and harms. And also the need for recognizing transparency and lawful data governance as not a burden, as not a burdensome obligation, but rather as an ethical imperative, which is vital for consumer trust and exercising of data protection rights. At this juncture, that's it from my end. I don't know if Barbara will have an opportunity to make any concluding remarks in terms of the overall submissions that we'll be making at the end of the day, but yes, that's it from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Freda. I think you've given very insightful details, insightful discussions on how all of us from different institutions can embed different data privacy practices, be more deliberate, as opposed to just doing it for the sake of doing it. Because from what you're saying, whereas institutions are taking the steps to embed the requirements for data protection and privacy, it doesn't look like many of them are very intentional about doing it right. So I think we need, as representatives from different organizations, to take the steps to ensure that we are very deliberate and intentional in ensuring that we are able to achieve the objectives for data protection and privacy. Thank you very much for those. Right now, we'll get into the Q&A session. We'll start. I see a question from Henry Magala. Brian, are you able to respond to the first question from Mr. Henry Magala?
Yes, I can. Let me see.
So I'll just go ahead and read it out loud. Henry is inquiring from you. He's requesting for an explanation regarding the use of data that is collected and also to provide an experience when you have used data to detect wrong elements. He's from AHF Uganda Cares. Yeah.
Thanks, Barbara, and thanks, Henry, for the question. Yeah, so I'll just give an example, though it wasn't in Uganda, it was in a different country, where somebody has used another person's card details to sign up for Uber as the card on which payments would be debited. Now, when Uber ran the card details through its algorithm, it was matched to a different user who had used the same card previously. So Uber reached out to the previous user and inquired whether they had authorized somebody else to use their card details, and turned out that they hadn't. So that account was closed immediately. So that's one example I can think of.
Okay, thank you very much, and I think that responds to your questions. Another question from Elisha Musasizi to you, Brian. As Uber, how safe is the personal data collected while transacting, and what strategies have you put in place to ensure that information collected is secure? I think Brian did respond to this in his second question, and I
I hinted on it.
Asked earlier before you gave the details.
Yes, I hinted on it earlier. I think the question still mentions where they had Uber lost personal data, but I think we've come a long way. We've adopted privacy by design. There's also employee risk. That's one other risk people never talk about, but your employees can also be a risk. And we have really focused on that, and we undertake them through continuous trainings. And they're also aware that there are consequences if you mishandle people's personal data, and those consequences are strictly implemented. So that's one other way we've tried to protect personal data.
Okay, thank you very much. This question, I'm going to give it to Freda. How is my data protected when I'm asked to submit my national ID? I'm sure this has been answered before by PDP-OU, but Freda, if you have an answer, we can have it, or if Becca can step in, or any other panelists.
I'll step in, Barbara. Thank you. Now, the question of how such data is protected, it's not something that we can respond to, because PDPO, much as it's within NITA, is not NERA. You know, at times people, when they hear NITA, they think it's NERA. Now, whoever collects the personal data has the responsibility. Those measures, we do not have near on the call. They're the only people that can adequately respond to. But in various communications, they've made assurances that they put these in place. They have policies, but the specificity of it, we cannot do that. That can only be NERA. Thank you. Over to you, Barbara.
Okay, maybe just to add to what you've said. So in specifics, I think the Registration of Persons Act that governs NERA clearly provides for different transactions or engagements where an individual may be requested to give their national ID for purposes of identification because it's an identification document. Now, when it comes to protecting this information, that gets us back to other elements relating to data protection and privacy. What mechanisms, what measures does an institution that is asking for your national ID have in place? And what is the purpose for which they're asking for the national ID? Is it a rightful purpose? So that would depend on an organization to be able to prescribe the purposes, to clearly state the purposes for which they are asking your national ID and what measures they have in place to protect your data. Okay, I see another question here. Just a minute, guys. And then, so someone asks about if clients must sign off privacy notices. I'm sure, Becca, you've done a session on this, but we can get back to it later on if we have some more minutes. And then also this is in relation to Safe Border, but maybe Brian could be able to respond if they have similar policies in place. So just in case it's applicable to Uber, you can respond. If not, then we would let it lie for now. So he's asking in regards to Safe Borders terms and conditions that relinquish all accountability if a client is attacked or robbed by their drivers or riders. Actually, now he says Uber. Does Uber share the same stance here on the matter? And at what point do we hold these organizations accountable for the actions of their riders or drivers? Brian, are you able to respond? Okay.
Yes, I can. I think, well, it's not really purely a data-related question, but it raises an important issue, and the way the gig economy works, as things like Safe Border and Uber, it raises an important issue that's being grappled with all over the world. What's the true characteristic of these drivers? Are they agents of Uber, for instance, or they are just independent contractors? Now, there are countries where it has been held that those people are agents, in which case an entity like Uber will be liable for them. So even if they put a disclaimer in the terms and conditions, it will be of no effect. You can't disclaim liability of your agent. But if they are independent contractors, as in some countries it has been determined, then so then the company wouldn't be liable for their actions because they will be acting on their own. So the contracts say, I know typically the contracts say the driver is not an employee of Uber, he's an independent contractor, and if that is a true position, then they wouldn't be liable. The company wouldn't be liable.
Okay. All right, thank you, Brian. This is to Becca. Is it possible for one to track how their data is being utilized by the holder? Secondly, for most of the sites, the person or we are all required to accept all cookies. What does this imply?
The first question of can you track? Thank you. The first question on can you track how your data is being utilized? One, the law gives you as a right, there's a form that you actually fill in and you put it to those particular data controllers, those that collect and use your data. Finding out, number one, starting with which data they have and including those particular questions of how actually it's being tracked. Now, in instances where other parties have obtained it, the second question on cookies, I didn't get it. What was it about?
So the second question is, for most of the sites, as consumers, we are required to accept all cookies. What does that imply, accepting all cookies?
Okay, accepting all cookies. Before I continue with that, maybe to tie the notes on who is tracking your data or who has had access to it. Now, that form that I've talked about, when you complete it, It helps you get feedback from the particular company. If you believe that feedback is not satisfactory, that is where you can reach out to us as PDP, or you make a complaint. What they've given to you, you believe it's not satisfactory, you believe other people could be accessing it, tracking your data, and then we'll take it up as a complaint and we investigate. So on our website, that form is where you can obtain it in the information center within resources. You complete, either email it or physically take it to that company where you need that information that you talked about. Now, going back to cookies, accept all definitely is not something that we recommend, and it actually goes against the law, because cookies actually collect your information, which is used by this particular company. So we always advise, a number of companies have taken up the advice, that there are some cookies which are essential to be able to have the platform up and running, say website. So they may not necessarily collect your personal data. It could be just to understand what features or areas of the website are usually down, so that they can actually improve. But those where it's going to be used, such as for advertising, identifying you, giving you an advertising number, they should definitely give you an option of you either opting in or even deciding that you don't want to be tracked at all. So those that go to websites that require you to just accept all without giving you these particular options, we clearly advise you that you shouldn't be using such website. You should really think twice, because in some of the investigations that we conduct, we've seen that those that just have the accept all feature, it can actually be a very big problem for your privacy because the information is misused. Thank you.
Okay, and then we'll go through 3 more questions, and if there are any other questions that you have, you can as well email PDP or Uganda, and they will be quick to jump in to offer in support. So this question goes to Frida. What are the 5 out of 6 indicators you are talking about? Knowing this will help us self-review and improve. I think this was also answered, unless if I'm mistaken. She gave details of this, but Frida, you can just clarify in a second what this is all about, pointing to what you discussed. Is she there? Okay, in the meantime, we'll get to the next question from Perry Ongo. Are there any mandatory compliance trainings targeting those who collect personal data? Becca, over to you.
Sorry, Barbara, I missed that.
So are there any mandatory compliance trainings targeting those who collect personal data, like processors, collectors? Do we have any mandatory trainings for them around data protection and privacy?
Yeah, mandatory, whether the trainings are there, I should first start with the provision of the law. The law makes it mandatory for data protection officers to actually receive training. But
kindly mute.
It's
Okay, you can continue.
Okay. So the mandatory trainings, now within the filing of your annual compliance report, we make it mandatory for those entities registered with PDPO that the DPO themselves, they should have undertaken training, but also their staff, third parties, and even contractors, they should have trained them on the law and the policies. So definitely it's mandatory, and we require its reporting within the annual compliance report. So when they're engaging their entities, that is something that they should bring out, that number one, it comes from the law, but also in the annual compliance report, it's required to be reported on. So yes, it is good enough as PDPO. We conduct monthly annual webinars on the last Thursday at 11 a.m., but we also encourage you to budget and undertake others that may even lead to certifications. Over to you, Barbara.
Thank you. I also see something from Nicholas Seguia from MTN, just giving people tips on what needs to be in the privacy notice, supposedly summarizing what was shared by Emmanuel. And then another question from Chigunda around cookies that has been responded to. And then a specific question, the last question is from Clement, and he's asking Guba, is it possible to only sign for specific services? For instance, if you send them promotional materials that they do not need. think this is very popular. So Brian, you can end with that, and then we can move to closing remarks from PDPOU. Brian? Okay, Frida, you can give your response. Okay. Yes, Brian.
So the issue is it possible? Central. Yeah, so it is. I think the thing about promotional materials is if they're going to send you promotional materials, the privacy notice indicates that one of the users of your personal data will be to send you promotional materials. Now, if you don't agree to that, then you have to exercise your data your data rights and then object to that use. So it's something you can do, but you have to be very clear about it and inform the data controller or data collector that I don't want my data to be used for this purpose.
Okay, thank you very much. Frida, you can give the response to your question, and then I'll hand over to Anita to close the session.
Okay. Thank you, Barbara. Do you hear me all?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you so much. So I just want to quickly start off with a comment on the question regarding our collection of data by NERA. I want to highlight the fact that our review revealed that NERA did not have in existence of an accessible privacy policy on the website. And in regard to the concern that was raised by one of the participants is that we encourage NERA to adopt more transparency practices, and as well as including the fact that they need to make available their policy for people to access it and to know how they deal with data. In regard to the 6 sectors that inform part of our evaluation, the sectors involved are e-commerce, financial services, digital loan services, online betting, telecommunications, and e-government. Barbara, I would like to end with some few reflections from our end. And so when we looking ahead in terms of the current reviews and what we've been able to establish, we see that with the current status quo, with the current issues that we have interfaced with, they enable ongoing opaque collection and processing of personal data without sufficient consent and purpose limitation or security, which is undermining the principles of lawful and fair data protection. It also allows continuation of vague blanket disclosures rather than evolving norms around accountability. So a lack of transparency will hinder exercising of individual privacy rights under the different legislation. To this end, we hope that the different companies in the different sectors can evaluate, they can elevate openness and accountability around data practices, thus which remains critical for empowering user control, regulatory oversight, and responsible data governance, which is aligned with the different legislation. Organizations must be motivated to move from opacity to transparency. I thank you for listening to me and the opportunity for God and my country. Over to you, Barbara.
Thank you, Frida, for the wonderful work you're doing. And then something closing from Emmanuel. I think he wants to respond to something.
Yes, Barbara, thank you. I wanted to highlight that there is a misconception, most especially for us like a media house, from people regarding news versus private information. So it has come out in the questions, but I would like to clarify that as we are collecting news, it's not the same as when we are collecting your data. And so some people come and they want to force you to delete, for example, a news article that you run, and there are mechanisms in place for consideration of such. For example, if you run a news article and it is not right, or you went to court and you got a court order for us maybe to delete that information, or in cases where we consider that information to be detrimental to your current life. For example, if you ran it 10 years ago and all of a sudden something has happened. So from a human perspective, then we help you delete it. But many people think that the news that we collect is the same as PII, and so we need to make that distinction. Privacy relates to your privately identifiable information, as we have stated, not on the news that we collect. So that's the distinction I wanted to make for that.
Okay, thank you very much. So if you have any other specific questions, kindly feel free to share on the concern and emails. But then also it's Data Privacy Month. PDPO is running different data privacy awareness campaigns, and they've always done this. They always do it month in, month out. So kindly feel free to follow them on the different social media handles, go to their website. Most of the questions you have will actually be answered by the materials available there. Thank you. Over to you, Anita. Thanks everyone who has participated, our panelists and participants, and PDPO Uganda for organizing this amazing session. Over to you, Anita.
Thank you, Barbara. I'll first give it to Becca to give a few remarks, then I'll come in.
Okay, thank you, Anita. We're well past time, so I'll be extremely brief. Thank you once again to our panelists, those that have stayed on the session. The interest has really been sustained. It is very clear that collection of personal data, individuals are becoming more aware, wondering what information is being collected, questions sent to Uber, individuals wanting to know whether something is done about this, or what kind of processing they engage in. It's something that we couldn't have within 1 hour. Good enough with the Privacy Month is that these conversations can actually be held with different organizations. You can reach out to them. So questions around usage, sharing, and even general understanding of what your data is being put to, but also getting to know who the data protection officers are in these organizations would greatly help. So with that, the general overview is this comes from the law, Section 13 of the Data Protection and Privacy Act, around transparency. And it really ties into our theme of stop, think, own your privacy, most especially around think, getting to know how these privacy notices are actually being used to collect your data and also use it. With that, I hand over to Anita, and thank you for attending.
Okay, thank you very much, Becca. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Barbara for the excellent moderation. I would like to also thank our panelists. Thank you so much for making the time, and of course for the insights that you shared with us. Also to our participants, we would like to thank you for always making the time every time we call upon you for these webinars. We hope we found today's session very insightful, and we also, of course, encourage you to share the knowledge you gained today with your friends, your family, and colleagues. And of course, as Barbara mentioned earlier, our data privacy campaign is still ongoing. Please follow us on our different social media platforms to keep updated with the different activities that are ongoing and how you can be a part of them. So I shared a link in the chat. Kindly click on it before you exit this webinar. Click on it and give us feedback on how today's webinar was. The feedback you give us helps us to make the future webinars better for you. Thank you so much. See you next Thursday. We'll have another webinar on Thursday, and it will be followed by a tweet space on the same day in the evening, but all this will be communicated on our different social media platforms. Otherwise, thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure having you. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.